in today's preaching. Hearthstone, the Grand Tournament. Update on Kingdom Come Deliverance. And lastly, a look at failed free-to-play models. Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another preaching. My name is Prophet, and today the first topic is going to be TGT Hearthstone, the Grand Tournament. The new expansion, all the cards basically have been announced, I think. I'm pretty sure that all the cards are now out, and people are taking a good more in-depth look at it, compared to, the tiny card releases that they have had prior to this. But now everything is finally out, and the general consensus seems to be that people are not too happy about it, simply based on the fact that it's not as amazing, it's not that great, it didn't change the meta in the same way that we saw Gnomes vs. Goblins did, or Goblin vs. Gnomes, I can't even speak properly. Anyway, the point here is that what that expansion did is that it just released the entire mech scene, and it made that into, its own meta, kinda. Stuff like Mech Mage is strong, a Piloted Shredder, or Dr. Boom. Just cards that generally just dominate the game, and is almost an auto-include in most decks. Like, at least a few mechs are basically auto-include in every deck, almost, right? And that just shows of how amazing, expansion that was, on how dominating all the cards were. And I think that they understood that if they were going to release every expansion just to make more cards auto-include, it would be kind of weird. Personally, I would prefer that, but in this expansion they have introduced two new mechanics for those who do not know. It's the Inspire Mechanic and the Joust Mechanic. The Inspire Mechanic is that some kind of effect, something will happen each time you use your hero power. Either if it is deal 1 damage to an enemy minion, do this, do that, buff this minion, give it 1 extra health, give it 1 extra attack, anything kind of stuff like that, right? Summon a minion, anything. It's all based around your use of hero power. So that means that some minions will have to, basically cost 2 extra, or 1 extra, depending on what card you have in your deck. Just because you will have to use your hero power to even get good strong value out of the card. So suddenly a card that might have been a decent play on turn 4, suddenly you kind of have to play it on turn 6 because you're not really sure if you can actually ever play it on turn 4 unless you have very strong board presence. The other mechanic is the Joust Mechanic. The Joust Mechanic is basically both players draw a card each, and if you have the higher mana card, then you win straight up. So, for example, Shaman got a new healing card. It's a 7 heal for 3 mana, but if you win the Joust, basically both of you look at the card and your card has a higher mana cost than you win, and it becomes a 14 heal for 3 mana, which is huge and amazing. So that is basically the gist of the entire TGT. Personally, I am excited to see some more pirate cards because I'm a big fan of the pirate decks. But I'm not entirely sure of how impactful the entire expansion will have on the meta. Everyone thought that the dragons might become like a meta. We had stuff like the Dragon Consort, which basically meant that Paladin would maybe be able to make some Paladin dragon decks. Maybe Priest could make some Priest dragon decks, but no, at most you just add 3-4 dragons that have some synergies with each other. Like, if you have a dragon in your deck, you do this, right? And some of those cards are pretty nice to have, but in general, the expansion never really were any amazing. It did not, the entire adventure did not show up with a lot of cards that would change the meta. So yeah. I mean, some cards were good, some cards were added, but in general, that entire adventure were not that impactful. And this, we will have to wait and see if TGT will be, but so far, maybe I wouldn't think so. I think some cards will be good and improve certain decks, but as the meta is right now, not as much. So yeah, we'll have to see about that. Alright, so the second The second part here is just going to be basically an update, a status update on Kingdom Come Deliverance, because I know that a lot of people were kind of hyped. Personally, I'm really hyped to see how well along that was, and they will apparently be releasing the alpha, the beta editions, you know, for the people who contributed on the Kickstarter. If you can pay them now, they have stopped adding stretch goals. But in general, you can pay them more money to be able to, you know, get into the early access, basically. So I just wanted to give you guys an update, because that video that I made about that got a few hits, so I guess some people are interested. Now, personally, as I mentioned in the previous video, I were incredibly hyped for this game. The elements of RPG that they added, you can have each your different own like road to take if you want to be like a combatant style, if you want to be a trader, or if you want to be, you know, a rogue style. You have all those kind of like ways to power that you can really follow, which I personally found to be a very intriguing way, or a very intriguing part of a new RPG game. Because personally, a lot of the RPGs nowadays are just, the RPG element is that you can maybe design your character and then you can add skill points. That is not that RPG to me. Of course, we did see some good RPGs like in the last year, where they had a lot of multiple choices. You can choose what kind of path you wanted to take, so that was kind of good. But in general, this is the game that I'm really hyped about. But did I participate in the Kickstarter? No, I didn't, and I'm happy I did. They have currently only put out basically the alpha, which just say, here's a proof of the concept. Look, it works. And I gotta say, to be an alpha, it was pretty fucking well optimized. I'm not entirely sure how well it ran. It did not bring up my FPS, but it at least felt like 57 to 60, which is not really acceptable, because I always want it to be at least 60, preferably 70 and upwards, rather like towards 120 plus. But to be a proof of concept in an alpha, that is pretty good, because they had the kind of graphical style that we see from games like Ark and all those kind of games, survival games. But those are just poorly optimized, right? This was better looking and better optimized, which is really promising to see from an early proof of concept, right? But the proof of concept didn't really do anything. They had not yet to add anything of value, right? You can steal one thing, you can do a few menial tasks around a tiny little village, but that is it. I'm not saying that is a bad thing, but that is basically how far into the development that they have shown us yet. They have promised that they would come out with different chapters, as you would as you can call it. But in general, those chapters are just going to be like, well, this is just what you can do within the first chapter, then this, and this. I hope that the game will just be one seamless experience, instead of just reaching to a point where you're just like, okay, now this chapter ends, loading in the next chapter, which will be kind of weird. But in general, I think the proof of concept is a good thing that they did. It proved that, well, we are able to add bowmanship and all that. The stretch goals, I mean, I got the vibe of Star Citizen, where they're just like, well, there's a bunch of useless stretch goals. I have no idea, like, okay, so we have already paid really good fencers and swordsmen to do the combat, right? Do the motion capture. So why don't we like make them do an in-game tutorial on how to fence? You can basically learn to fence in-game instead of watching a DVD, for example, which is a really weird thing to do in my opinion. But I guess Is it the same with Star Citizen, which is now rated like $8 to $7 million, because why not, right? People, it's not even a game yet. But that is the thing. So I'm excited for it, but for anyone that have put money into the Kickstarter, just tell yourself that the money's gone. Basically, adding money on Kickstarter is like opening like your toilet and dropping the cash into the toilet and just flushing it. Just like, maybe like one day it shows up as a gold bar and you're just like, yeah, fuck yeah, I did it, right? But most of the times it just like, yeah, nothing really comes out of it. I do have hopes for this Warhorse Studio, but still, any money spent on Kickstarter, basically you just say it's dead. And then if at some point it turns out to come back to you, great. If not, too bad. The last topic of today is going to be the free-to-play market. The free-to-play market is something that dominates a lot of platforms. Basically, the entire iOS, Android, and PC market has so much presence from these free-to-play games. And if we look at the top esport titles right now, it's basically League of Legends, Dota 2. And like Heroes of the Storm is growing. They're the biggest. And then you have Counter-Strike Global Offensive, which is the only pay-to-play game on the top list. Of course, that is often very heavily discounted game, but still. And in general, we just see a lot of more free-to-play games pop up, right? Stuff like Dirty Bomb was released less than a year ago, I think, which is an FPS free-to-play game. Personally, I like that. But the thing is that what I want to talk about is that a lot of people just seem to abuse this entire, how should I say, this entire like model of how you should do it. League of Legends is actually one of those examples. It was really heavily abused, but now they have such popularity that they don't have to change it. Smite is a great game. I also forgot to add it on the list, but that is on the list of free-to-play esport games. Smite is basically like, well, you can pay like, I think it's like $20 to $30 or something, and you can get like every champion that will ever be released and have currently been released. That is just an insane value for any kind of user. I've mentioned this before in videos, and I really love the way Smite did it. Dota 2 is of course 100% free. You have everything from the get-go. The only thing you don't have is basically cosmetics. That is just probably like the best business model that anyone can ever have, right? But then you have League of Legends, which is so expensive. League is probably the most expensive free-to-play in esports. But that is, we're gonna steer away from like the top games and just that is how they do it. But what I see just a lot of free-to-plays do nowadays is that they tease you with content and then they say, well, you have to pay. Remember that you have to pay. And honestly, that is the most annoying thing. I understand when games want you to invest some money to either be able to progress quicker. I have no trouble with that. But for example, actually, like I would not call it a AAA game, but Total War Battles Kingdom is a game that I tried out. I mentioned this in a previous video as well, where basically you would have, how can I put it, like, it's the same style as Farmville, right? You just have an area and you just build, just in a Total War style, right? So apparently you're lured in by the fact that it's one of a cool franchise. Personally, I really like that franchise. We're heavily drawn into it, and then I just tried it and, oh, you need 200 gold to be able to get this. Well, too bad you're only gonna get 20 gold an hour, and you have to log in every hour to collect the 20 gold. If you don't do that, you will not get another 20, right? And that is just insane. The thing about those kind of games, Farmville style, is that in the beginning you'll just have to you can just have the tab open or the game open 24/7, and you can just like, do all the things because it takes like 5 to 10 minutes. So it's like rapidly progressive and you can do other things in the meantime. And as time progresses, you will have, okay, this will take like 3 days to complete. Then you'll just like log in once a day or something like that to make sure everything's fine, maybe doing some tiny menial tasks, and then like you log in mainly for the third day, right? That is how those games are supposedly progressed. That is like the curve of the game. But in this game, it's basically, well, you have to get your resources, you will have to log in like at least every like hour, like 2 hour or something like that, and that just like does not work. You can't have that. You can't force players to just log in 24/7 because that just makes people want to quit it very early. I'm very sorry, that was my Facebook sound, not yours. So that is a very negative way of doing it. What you want people to want to log in like at least once a day. Say World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft's garrison from Warlords of Draenor is a great example on just this. They wanted you to log in like once a day at least so you could be able to just like activate and do all the different things that had to be done in your garrison, right? That is good. All your companions, like that is an efficient way to just do stuff and help the player just get some resources without having to necessarily grind a lot. That is nice. But say that World of Warcraft had a feature where you would get like a 10th of the thing, but you had to log in like 10 times a day. For those people who just played a lot, that is okay, I guess, besides the fact that they have to return to the garrison all the time. But say that you could just do it from a menu. That is fine for those who play it, like, just have it open all the time. But people who have to do other things as well in their life, then you kind of have to log in, or like, oh fuck, if I don't log in, I'm not going to get any bonuses, I'm going to fall far behind. Which just, in general, is a terrible concept. And that is what we see from a lot of those free-to-play, like, games that now pop up that are within that kind of builder style. Like, there is a reason why Clash of Clans is so incredibly popular. That is just because it plays on the, of course, friend mechanics. You can build up, but one of the things is that the curve is like, it works, right? In the beginning, they wanted to play a lot to get a feel for the game, and wanted to do stuff, wanted to use your soldiers effectively and use them a lot, because that way you will just stay logged in and you're just like, whoa, I'm intrigued in this game. And after a while, it's just like, well, you can only like start to fight less and less because your soldiers, you lose more soldiers and you'll have to spend more time building them because they take a longer time. And you feel like, well, that is okay, because like that is just a progression. I get better soldiers, they will take a longer time, but I will get better soldiers. The buildings, well, I get better buildings, it will take a longer time. That makes sense. And in your mind, that makes sense, even though it's annoying, it does make sense. And you always understand, well, it's a free-to-play, I'm not supposed to log in or be in-game 24/7 like on my mobile phone, right? It's not supposed to, I'm not supposed to like sit with my mobile and just be like, oh, I'm gonna be like logged in all day, because my phone would die after like 15 minutes. But that is not it. That is like, that is just the normal curve. The curve should be that people, their minds will automatically just tell them like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. But when you have a weird curve where it's just like, well, their buildings will take longer and longer time to build, so you have that curve, and then suddenly you're just like, well, the resource gathering is just like, you have to like gather resources all the time, so you just like go up and up and down and up and down, right? So you'll have to log in all the time to do that, but the buildings will take longer and longer time, so suddenly at some point when you just log in all the time to be able to farm resources is super annoying. And then you can compare that, where you have to log in all, you can always say like, oh well, Fallout Shelter, a lot of people like that, even though you have to log in all the time to gather resources. But the thing is, in my experience, if I can remember correctly, it's a long time, I did not play it, but according to what everyone told me, the building was basically instant, right? A lot of people will have, a lot of things happen instantly, but like the only thing you really had to wait for was the gathering of resources, right? So that, in that respect, it's just like, well, yeah, you have to log in to get resources, but that's the only reason to log in. It's not like you have to log in all the time to get resources just to be able to build the things, but then you have to log in to be able to upgrade them. Because you want to be able to just log in as soon as it's done and then re-upgrade it, right? But if you just then have to you have to log in 24, like all the time to be able to get the things, then that it just ruins the purpose of everything. It makes me mad. Thank you guys for watching this preaching. I hope you guys learned something. I hope it was something interesting topics. I'm trying to get back to this show. Sorry that it was not amazing, but as always, you have just been preached.